Good evening and welcome to Laurelly Online. Hope y'all are having a great week. It's been busy. This is my second week of classes, and my mic is hot. My headphones are hot, and we're gonna turn that down just a hair. It's been my second week of classes, and it's been ruthless. It's been ruthless busy. But anyhow, I hope y'all are having a great week. Hope y'all are staying safe, staying well. And hey, you know what? Let's open up and let's go ahead and get right to it and open up in a word of prayer. Lord, we come before you right now, and God, I just want to thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much for the mysteries of your word and how interesting it is. And God, I just want to thank you so much for the way you gave us your word and just the mystery, how intriguing it is. And God, we're going to dig into some of that mystery and some of that intriguing things about your word tonight. And God, I hope that even if there's not a per se lesson going, I hope it, if nothing else, intrigues people to delve deeper into your word and interest and spark some interest in your word. Lord, right now, I just want to lift up anybody who's sick, anybody who needs prayer, anybody who is just feeling burned out during this season. God, that's easy to do right now, to feel that way. But God, I just want to lift folks up. God, I pray that each one, you will give people a renewed sense of fervency. God, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to serve you. And I want to thank you so much for everything that you've done for me. And God, I just want to thank you so much for your grace and your mercy of giving me life when I don't deserve it. And I'm a sinner. And despite that, you saved me. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for that. God, I know I get down, I get discouraged, but God, I confess that before you. Because I'm still breathing, I'm still kicking, I'm still blessed and highly favored, and I have no reason to bellyache and get down like I do sometime. And God, I just pray that if anybody else that's feeling down, God, I pray that they will just count their blessings, as the hymn says. And Lord, again, just thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much for everything you're doing to and through us. In Christ's name, amen. Well, let's jump into some... let's look at some announcements. So let me see what here. I didn't change. I didn't change my announcement screen, so I might have to do that on the fly. Tonight, probably right now, Rejuvenate for the youth group. That is every week, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. About 6:15 or 6:45ish is when they're starting that. Also, the Sprouts Children's Ministry on Wednesday nights, that's going on at the same time. So if you've got kids, bring them out to that. Oh, where'd it go? Ah, there it is. Also, our ladies are going through Matchless. They had their first virtual online meeting last night that, from what I've heard, it went very well. And it's not too late to get into that if you would like to. If you'd like to get into that, just contact Tammy and let her know. So the youth were going to... hold on, let me get rid of that. Bye. The youth were going to go bowling, but y'all be praying for Eric and Leanna. They are having flu-like symptoms, and so we know that, anytime anybody's having flu-like symptoms, we need to pray for them, so pray for them. But the youth group will not be going bowling Friday as we had originally planned. So that's out. That's going to be postponed till later. And also, of course, this Sunday we are continuing our our sermon series on the parables. Super excited about this. It's been fun. I've had a blast so far with the first two. We've had the parable of the talents and the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. And just looking at the picture, I want to see if y'all can start trying to guess what some of the rest of them are going to be. A couple of them are pretty obvious, I think, but I want to see how y'all can guess what the rest of the parables are going to be. I want to see how close y'all can get. I think I might actually make that a post and put that on the Facebook page and see how well y'all can figure out what the rest of the parables are going to be. Anyhow, let's jump right into it. So we have been going through 2 Samuel. We've been talking about David and kind of filling in where, that sermon series about David and kind of filling in where we didn't have sermons. And tonight we are actually in a passage that I did do a sermon on. However, I want to expand on it a little bit more. Wanted to expand on a certain topic. So this is really going to be less about David and more about one of my absolute kind of non-theological topics that I like to kind of dabble in and do some research on, and it's interesting to me. And this is the topic of giants. Yes, we're going to talk about giants tonight because giants in the Bible are really cool. It's a really cool topic. And so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight or this afternoon. We will be, our main passage of scripture from 2 Samuel is going to be 2 Samuel chapter 21, and we're going to be in verses 15 through 22. And I guess I can go ahead and get that up. Yeah. And basically, so again, we're kind of getting to the point of 2 Samuel where like the main, a lot of it was kind of going in chronological order. A lot of it was going in pretty close to what we assume is chronological order. And then all of a sudden, kind of after we get through this little chunk of it, we get to like David's death and kind of getting ready to go into 1 Kings and start talking about Solomon. But like the writers of 2 Samuel kind of get to this point, and they've told David's story kind of mostly in chronological order, and they get to this point and go, hey, there was a couple other things we wanted to talk about, so let's just kind of pack them in right here at the end of his life before we start talking about his death. And these are just other things that happened in the life of David. However, we don't really know when all of these things happened. And this is one of those events that, this comes right after David avenges the Gibeonites, and we don't really know at what point in David's life he avenged the Gibeonites. And just like we don't really know when all these events with these giants took place. And again, I actually preached one of the sermons that I did in the David series, and I hope one of my favorite sermons, and I hope one of the more memorable sermons of this series. I actually preached from this passage, and that was about Ishbi-Benob. The giant that nearly killed David. So let's read this passage real quick. And again, I'm going to put it back on the window so you know exactly where we're at. And you know what? Actually, I've got this in the New King James. Tonight, I'm going to swap over, and I'm actually going to read this from, what do I have here? This is the ESV. I'm going to read this from the ESV tonight because it's we're gonna be reading more out of looking at this more of ESV and NIV tonight, and there's a specific reason that we're going to use those translations. Oh, that's first Samuel. I wish I would have already done this. That would have made sense, but I didn't. All right. 2 Samuel 21, 15 through 22. There was again a war between the Philistines and Israel, and David went down together with his servants, and they fought against the Philistines. David grew weary, and Ishbi-benob, one of the descendants of the giants. Oh, wow. It says giants here.
That's interesting.
So I am gonna read it from the NIV. Before I started, I was thinking there's something that I need to be doing here that I should have already been done, and I totally forgot what it was. All right, so NIV. Once again, there was a battle between the Philistines and Israel, and David went down with his men to fight the Philistines, and he became exhausted. And Ishbi-benob, one of the descendants of Rapha. So in the King James Version, and apparently the ESV, which I thought the ESV said Rapha as well, in the King James Version, the New King James Version, apparently the ESV, other versions, it says giant. And in as what we see here in the NIV and other translations, it says Rapha. Now the actual Hebrew word is Rapha, and Rapha. I'll explain. We'll get into what Rapha means, and I'm not going to try to explain that right now. But we'll get into what Rapha means. It means giant, but it means more than. It's a particular type of giant, whose bronze spearhead weighed 300 shekels, and was armed with a new sword. He said he would kill David, but Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, came to David's rescue, and he struck the Philistine down and killed him. Then David's men swore to him, saying, "Never again will you go with us into battle, so the lamp of Israel will not be extinguished." This is why I think that this particular incident happened the war season right before his sin with Bathsheba. And I think this is the reason he wasn't at war with, that he didn't go to war with his men. Verse 18, in the course of time, there was another battle with the Philistines at Gob, and at that time, Sibekiah the Hushite killed Saph, one of the descendants of the Rapha. Again, we're talking about the Rapha. In another battle, which took place at Gath, there was a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He was also a descendant of the Rapha. And again, in the King James Version and New King James and apparently ESV, this all says he was descendants of the giant. Yeah. It says all the way through in the ESV, it says descendants of the giant. In the NIV, it says Rapha. This guy had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes. It doesn't give him a name, but we're going to call him 6 Cube. So let's go to verse 20. In another battle, and still another battle, which took place in Gath. Oh, wait, that was the one I just read. When he taunted Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimeah, David's brother, killed him. So another one of David's nephews stepping up. These four were descendants of Rapha and Gath, and they fell at the hands of David and his men. So again, here is a collection of events. This sometimes you will hear this taught as it's a single battle that 4 giants were killed, and this is absolutely not. It's very clear from the text, this is not a single battle. This happened during the course of Israel's many wars with the Philistines and fighting with these Philistine kind of Philistine giants. And I'll explain, we'll get to that too. These giants weren't true Philistines. They were actually Canaanites. Which is, we'll get to that a little bit later as well. But again, throughout David's reign, these giants were some of the giants that were killed in battle by some of David's mighty men. And So some of the people that critique the Bible or want to, even Christian scholars, biblical scholars who want to, there's this kind of, there are some biblical scholars who want to take the miraculous out of the Bible. They want to take the stuff that's in the Bible that's really miraculous and make it mundane. And that's not the point of good Bible study. And so there are those that will say that, oh, these are just really big guys, or the giants in the Bible, they suffered from the modern day giantism, and that is a thing. And this is, they weren't just big dudes, and this wasn't giantism. This was modern giantism. This is something totally different, and we will get to that. But first, I want to show you that the Bible does make a distinction between just a really big dude and what they consider a giant. So we're going to flip over to, I'm going to go to this. We're going to flip over to 2 Samuel 23, 20 and 22, and and we're going to read this real quick. And it says, and Benaiah, and now keep that name in mind, because we're gonna be talking quite a bit about Benaiah. This is the first time we've mentioned him, but Benaiah is a bad dude. And towards the end of David's life, Benaiah starts playing kind of a major role. He starts playing a major role with Solomon. And so we're going to be, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking quite a bit more about Benaiah. But this is the first time we really mention him. And this really sets a precedence of who this guy is and what he's capable of. He's a bad dude. He's such a bad dude that Joab is scared of him. Joab's scared of you, you're a bad dude. But anyhow, Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was a valiant fighter from Kabzeel. He performed great exploits. He struck down 2 of Moab's best men. He also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. Okay, so this is, verse 21 is kind of the one that I really want us to kind of see the difference whenever even in the same chapter, in the same book, a couple chapters later, the distinction between a giant and a really big dude. He struck down a huge Egyptian. Although the Egyptian had a spear in his hand and Benaiah went against him with a club, he snatched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. So here, and in the 2 Chronicles, also in the book of Chronicles, this event is brought up too about Benaiah killing this huge Egyptian. But in Chronicles, it gives the guy's height, which ends up being about, he's in the 7-foot range. I mean, he's no giant. And the Bible makes that clear. Nowhere it says he's a huge man. In Chronicles, it says a huge man, in 2 Samuel, it says a huge Egyptian. Nowhere does it call him a Rapha. Nowhere does it call him Nephrim. Nowhere does it call him an Enoch. None of these words that they use to describe giants. He's just a big dude. He's a big man. And so they make a distinction between just somebody who is big, a big champion, versus a giant, versus a Rapha, versus an Anak, versus a giant like Goliath. Like these 4 giants. They're different. They're supernatural. And so we'll get to that. What were they? What were these giants that made them different from this huge Egyptian? So let's look at that as well. So we're going to go over to Genesis chapter 6, in verse 4, and this is kind of one of the first times that giants are mentioned, and these are kind of, well, we'll get to that. Genesis 6:4, and the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, and that's important. When the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them, They were the heroes of old, men of renown. All right, so a lot of people are very familiar with this, the Nephilim. And one of the big misconceptions about the Nephilim is that these were pre-flood only. But it's very clear here, and it says there were Nephilim on the earth in those days, which is the time of the flood, and also afterwards, which is immediately after the flood. So the giants were on the earth in the days of the flood, and they were also in the earth in the time after the flood, which is obviously after the flood, and that's how they end up surviving after the flood, because this started happening again, where the sons of God, meaning some type of celestial being, we assume to be what we would consider today to be demons, demonic forces, somehow had children with human women. Again, I don't know how this happened, but this is what this is saying. And again, it says that down here at the bottom, it says that these were the heroes of old, men of renown. I mean, so this is Genesis, and this is old, and this is talking about even old. These were they're very distinguished. There's men of renown, heroes of old, and the term hero here is not talking about hero like what we think of hero. The term hero here is like the next level of champion. Like champion is like a great dude, and then a hero that doesn't mean, we have this connotation with hero that they're noble and they're good. Their connotation of hero was just they were awesome. They were huge. They were just heroes. Whether they were good or bad, they were heroes. The connotation's different. And so this is the half demon, half human giant Nephilim that is referred to in Genesis 6:4. Now, some will say that nowhere in here does it actually say that they were giants. Well, that gets brought up later. So let's see where that gets brought up in Numbers 13:33. We saw Nephilim there. And so this is, okay, so to give you a little background of where this is the accounts of the spies. When Moses sent the spies into the promised land, these are the accounts of the 10 spies that gave the bad account. He said, we saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Enoch come from Nephilim. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. So here, the Bible's making the connection between the Nephilim and giantism, of these guys being giants. And the spies, all right, so the spies here, in the context of what's going on, the spies are saying, oh, it's the Nephilim. And these weren't actually Nephilim. They were the descendants of the Nephilim called the Enoch. And it's a group of people. It's a tribe of giants. It's a type of giants that were in the land at the time called the Enoch, and they were giants. But they weren't true Nephilim. But the reason that these spies are saying that is because the Nephilim are the real scary ones. They are the half demon, half the half human, half demon giants. The really and so they're embellishing this. It wasn't actually Nephilim. It was the Enoch, but the Enoch are the descendants of the Nephilim, which are giants. And they're saying, we look like grasshoppers in our, and again, they're embellishing this. But we're going to get an idea exactly of this generation of giant, of how big they actually were. And kind of a connection between I'm going to going all over the Bible. We're pulling all this together. Stay with me. You got to pay attention tonight. So hang with me tonight, okay? All right. So Deuteronomy 2, 10, and 11. And it says the Emites who used to live there. And this is Deuteronomy. This is just making we're going back through and Deuteronomy is a recap of everything that's going on and a commission to go into the promised land. So they're recapping their what they've done before they go into the promised land. It says the Emites used to live there, a people strong and numerous, and as tall as the Anandakites. The Anandakites are the Enoch. Like the Anandakites, they were considered Rephaites, but the Moabites called them Emites. Okay, so this is just a bunch of ites and everything. But here we again have the Anakites, which we talked about in the... go back. Okay. All right. So it talks about the Anandakites, which was brought up in Numbers 13:33, what we just talked about as the descendants of the Enoch. The Enoch are Nephilim. And here they were considered Rephaites. Rephaites are the descendants of the Nephilim. And that's when it says Rephaites, it's Repha. And so this is whenever we are in 2 Samuel and all these giants are being described as descendants of the Repha or Repha, that's what it means. It doesn't mean that they're big men. This is the writers of 2 Samuel making a reference back to these guys of being descendants of the Nephilim. They are descendants of these half giant or half demon, half human, crazy, scary giants. The Nephilim were so scary that even like whenever you actually had Anakites in the land, when the spies were trying to embellish, there were giants there, and they're trying to embellish giants. And so instead of just saying, they were giants, they're saying they're Nephilim. That's next level, okay? These giants are descendants of those. They are demonic. They are, and this is the connection. I went through all these crazy verses to show you the connection. And we're reading it out of the NIV instead of the King James because it just says giants. But I wanted to more specific what the Hebrew said. The Hebrew says the Rapha. And the Rapha, again, we see this connection with the Rapha and the actual pre-flood and immediately after the flood, demonic Nephilim giants. So these things weren't just big men. They weren't just, what people that suffered from what we consider today as the genetic disorder of giantism. There was something demonic about them. There was something, they were monsters. Monsters in every sense of the word. They weren't even truly, purely all the way human. They were an abomination of God's creation. Pretty scary and pretty interesting of what these things actually were. And again, it brings up the 6 fingers and 6 toes and who's not to say that they didn't have Egyptian. So there are, and I was going to wait till last, there are Egyptian sources that also bring up the Enoch, and what they say about them, they say that they have wild faces. They say the Egyptians account of these Enoch, and again the sizes are measured in cubits, and the Egyptian their cubits are like 4 or 5 cubits, but the Egyptian cubit is a lot bigger than the Israelite cubit or the Canaanite cubit. So the Egyptians were taller than the Canaanites, and so their cubits were longer. But that put them at the same size. So the sizes, the 8 to 9 foot range for that period is the same as what the Israelites are describing. And here the Egyptians are describing them as having like faces like wild animals and deformities in their faces. And we already see here deformities in their hands. And so these were scary. These were scary. Not just the size of them. They were scary. They weren't purely human. And that is the difference between the descendants of the Rapha and a huge Egyptian. That these things were they scary. They were monsters. Were scary. Some interesting stuff. So let's continue on and let's explain a little bit about the Rapha and some different theories and about some other giants that we see in the Bible, and some just some of the history, some of the unsung history between these giants and the Israelites. So Deuteronomy 3:11, it says, Og of Bashan was the last of the Rephaites, which is the Ripha. His bed, which also is translated to coffin or sarcophagus, depending, that it could. A lot of people think that the actual what the Hebrew is actually saying here is sarcophagus, but it's the same word. His bed or sarcophagus. I don't even have the screen. Hold on. Let me get this up. Og, king of Bashan, was the last of the Rephaites. His bed or sarcophagus was decorated with iron and was more than 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. It is in Rabbah of the Amorites. So what this means, these dimensions are basically 13 foot by 6 foot. So his sarcophagus was 13 foot long and 6 foot wide. So this puts him at 12 foot tall. So Goliath was about 9 foot tall. Og, that Moses defeated, or the Israelites under Moses defeated. This dude is in the realm of 12 foot tall. And what's interesting is it says that his either bed, which being that it's pure iron, probably sarcophagus, is still, it wasn't destroyed. Moses and them didn't destroy it, and so that would be that would be a cool find. That would be a cool archaeological discovery, to discover Og's sarcophagus and the body of this guy of of a 12 foot tall giant in a 13 foot long sarcophagus. That would be a cool find. Just anybody in there, anybody watching who might be a future archaeologist wants something cool to look for. Let's look for Og and his sarcophagus, and that would put some pretty definite credibility to a biblical account. But anyhow, so one theory about all these different types of giants, you have what is, of all 4 of the giants in 2 Samuel that we started off talking with, they're all called descendants of the Rapha or sons of the Rapha. And here in Deuteronomy 3:11, it's saying that Og, king of Bashan, was the last of the Rephaites. And then we have the Nephilim, which is another type of giant. So what some scholars say is that these were like 3 different classes of giants, and that the Nephilim was like the true half human, half demon, and probably the biggest of the giants. And the other sources, so there are other sources outside of the Bible that that I don't put a lot of weight into because they're not canonized. But stuff like the Book of Enoch, and in the Book of Enoch, the Nephilim are anywhere from 20 to 40 foot tall. They are way out there, huge. And so one theory is that these are different classes of giants, and that the further away from the actual Nephilim they are, the smaller that they get, and by the time that they are at Goliath and these other four giants, they're not even considered Rapha. They are descendants of the Rapha because Og was the last of the Rapha, and he was the last giant that was in the 12 to 13 foot range. And then after that, everything ended up being about, all the other giants after that until they were extinguished ended up being in the 8 to 9 to 10 foot range. That's a theory. I mean, and I can see where that's coming from. Because all of these other types of giants all are either described of being descendants of the Nephilim or descendants of the Rapha. And here it says that King Og was the last of the Rephaites, or the last of the Rapha. And it also describes him as far as a description of a giant. He's the biggest one in the Bible that we get a description of being around 12 foot tall, judging from the size of his sarcophagus. Again, interesting stuff, interesting things about the giants and who they were. So, some of the unsung history between the Hebrews and the giants. And again, this is stuff that I've kind of covered, glazed over cover, but I want to kind of get into a little bit more detail about it. I can't click there. I got to click here. So some of the my favorite book of the Bible, Joshua 11:22. There was none of the Anakims, the Enoch, left in the land of the children of Israel, only in Gaza, Gath, and that should ring a bell. That should, make some connections there. And in Ashdod, there remained. So in Joshua 11:22, and this is kind of summing up some of the aftermath of the exploits of Joshua, we see here this is kind of summing up that this is the last of like the main narrative of the conquest of the promised land, where it pretty much says that Joshua has driven out all of the Anandakites, and that would be giants, out of Israel, and he lists 3 places where they remained, and one of them is Gath. And again, Gath should ring a bell because we know that Goliath was from the city of Gath. We also see here in 2 Samuel the passage that we were just in, that several of these giants were from Gath, and some of these battles were even fought in Gath. So we see here this connection between these giants and the giants that were in Israel during the conquest. So this is where it really gets a little bit more interesting. The book of Joshua. So the book of Joshua is a couple different sections, and so the first section of the book of Joshua is just the main narrative of this is the main and most complete narrative about how the whole conquest took place. Then there's another narrative about Caleb and Caleb's involvement in conquering Hebron. And that's what I want, and that's what we're going to look at right now. Joshua 14:12 through 15. And I have that marked in a Bible somewhere, I thought. I guess I don't. I guess I got to flip there with everybody else. At least I'm not getting way ahead of you with my flipping. So Joshua 14:12 through 15. And so this is Caleb. Caleb comes to Joshua and makes this request of Joshua. Now, give me the hill country that the Lord promised me in that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites, giants, were there in their cities, were large and fortified, but the Lord helping me, I will drive them out, just as he said. Then Joshua blessed Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. So Hebron has belonged to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God Israel, wholeheartedly. All right, so here, verse 15. This is interesting. Hebron used to be called Kiriath Abra, after Abra, who was the greatest among the Anakites. Okay, so what that means? So Caleb from the tribe of Judah comes to David and says, David, I want Hebron. I want the part of Israel that where all the highest concentration of the giants. That's where the giants are. I want Hebron. Hebron is also where Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Sarah are buried. But I think Caleb wanted a piece of those giants, to be honest with you. He just seemed like that type. When the giants lived there, they called Hebron Kiriath Abra. Kiriath Abra is named after what they considered to be their greatest champion, the greatest giant champion that ever lived, which was ever in their culture. Was the name of Hebron, was the name of the city. Caleb conquers it, and the Hebrews start back calling it after themselves, Hebron. So, and again, these are the ones who are from the tribe of Judah. Also, David and most all his mighty men are from the tribe of Judah. And so, again, we see this connection between the tribe of Judah and these giants, because Caleb is the one that goes on and conquers Kiriath Abra, which he then starts either calling for the first time Hebron or starts back calling Hebron. We don't know what came first. What came first, Hebron or the Hebrews? Were the Hebrews named after Hebron, or was Hebron named after the Hebrews? Not really sure. There's a connection there. But now what the giants, this was their homeland. Their homeland, their capital city, their core concentration, the place that was named after their greatest warrior in history, is now being occupied by people from the tribe of Judah, and are now have renamed it, calling it after themselves. That's interesting. All right, so we're going to jump over again. This is probably, you know what, and I'm sure that this is not nearly as interesting to anybody else as it is to me. But you know what? That's okay. Because there might be one person that finds this a fragment of interesting to them as it is to me, and then it's worth it. So let's jump over to the next chapter, and let's go to chapter 15 and verse 14. And it gives a little bit. So this is yet another account of the same event, and this is kind of the third portion of the book of Joshua. It's a breakdown of this starts the breakdown of what tribes get what parts but it goes into a little bit of more explanation of how Caleb conquered Hebron. So chapter 15, verse 14, and it says, from Hebron, Caleb drove out 3 Anakites. So these are specific Anakites that Caleb drove out. And it says, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talima, descendants of Enoch. So here, this gives us a little, the specific giants aren't as important as this tells us something. This tells us that Caleb didn't kill all the giants. Some of them he drove out, not intentionally, but by the time he got there, they were gone. And it also tells us that the only places that the giants remained were in Gath and Ashdod and the other Philistine city. I can't remember it off the top of my head. So these are some of the giants that were in Gath, and some of the giants that were in these places actually came from, they were refugees. And I know it's crazy calling a giant a refugee. They were refugees, or they escaped Hebron. So whenever you look at when we go back to David and Goliath, and we see Goliath standing there, and again, another kind of layer to this is they go down to Gath and Gaza. That's it. How can I forget Gaza? They go down to Gath and Gaza and Ashdod and start settling in with the Philistines. They're not Philistines. That's not their. None of these giants are. They might be Philistine in culture, somewhat. They might be Philistine in the way they fight, but they're not Philistine by blood. Philistines are Greek. Philistines come from. They are Greek DNA, and they come from the island of Cyprus. And recent archaeological and DNA studies have proven that they did actually come from the Greece mainland. And so these giants are not by blood Philistines. Now they might have, be partially Philistine by now, but they were descendants of the actual residents of Canaan, that Joshua drove them out of their homeland into the land of the Philistines, where they have lived ever since. Or Joshua, specifically Caleb, the one from Judah, had driven them out. And so we think of this from Goliath's standpoint, where his family they've been a welcome foreigner, but they have been an immigrant. They're obviously a welcome immigrant, because who's going to say, oh, we don't want, we don't need, 9-foot something warriors fighting on our team. Y'all go on down the road. No. But again, I could imagine, this puts a little bit more, a little bit another layer into why Goliath would be standing up and yelling these threats at the Israelites. This puts another layer in there of why Goliath might have a chip on his shoulder towards the Israelites. Kind of interesting. And again, why these giants, not only are they terrifying, not only are they demonic, not only do they hate, they have an internal bred into them hate for God, because they've got demonic blood flowing through them. Because of their history, they have a deep-seated hatred towards the Israelites, especially David, who is from the tribe of Judah, just like Caleb, towards them. So this is when these giants are coming up here. This isn't just their duty as Philistine soldiers. And it's not just that they're scary. They're scary, they're big, and they absolutely, utterly hate the Israelites. And so this is much more like a grudge match, if you would. Anyhow, I don't know if anybody finds this a fraction of interesting as I do. I hope you do. I always try to lead, again, I said that this was going to be more of just a lesson tonight about just learning some things. But I always try to bring something morality-wise into it. And so here we have 4 giants being slayed. And scary giants, scary beasts. I mean, this is a big thing, killing a giant. Because again, they're big, they're scary, they're demonic, and they utterly hate everything that is Israel. And you kill one. And so you have 4 guys that killed 4 giants. None of them become the king of Israel. Yeah, you say, well, what? David became the king of Israel when he killed a giant. No, he became the king of Israel because God ordained him and chose him to be the king. And, sometimes we as Christians will play the comparing game, where we start comparing what we're doing and the results of what we're doing to what someone else is doing and the results of what they're doing. And we start looking at somebody else or another church, another ministry, and going, well, we're doing the same thing that they're doing. And man, the results of what they're doing is way better. I mean, they've we're doing the same thing and we're not hitting worth a lick, and they're doing it, and it's awesome. This is the thing. You're still conquering giants. Even if the results are different, you're still conquering giants. And, everybody knows David. Everybody knows David and Goliath. Very few people know about these other 4. Very few people realize that Caleb was like the giant slayer. Like Caleb was probably killed more giants than anybody. Or led more giants to being killed than anybody. Moses and his crew killed the last of the Rephaim, which probably was like the next level big giants, like the 11 to 12 footers. Moses and his crew killed the last of those. You don't hear about that. You hear David and Goliath, but all of these guys we talked about slayed giants. And it's not just the huge churches nowadays that are slaying giants. It's not just the big name Christians that are slaying giants. It's Christians every single day that are in the trenches, that are doing God's work, that are slaying giants. And so keep that encouragement up. All right, love y'all. Hope y'all have a great week. Let's close up in prayer. Lord, we come before you. And God, I know that this lesson is more of just information, but God, I pray that it sparks interest and it touches. Lord, right now, I just want to thank you so much for everything that you are doing to and through us. Thank you so much for your many, many blessings. Thank you so much for the way that you love us. And God, I pray right now that we'd be humble before you. And God, I pray right now that we would seek you every day. Lord, you're a good God and a great God. We love you. We give you all the honor and glory and praise. In Christ's name, amen. Y'all have a great rest of the week. Make sure you either come or tune in Sunday. And I love y'all, and I will talk with y'all later.